Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will get underway shortly. At this time, we'd like to ask everyone in the room to please find their seats. Once again, our program will begin shortly.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monsignor Joe Riley. I'm a priest from the Archdiocese of Newark, and I work at Seton Hall University. And I'm happy to be with you today as we remember a beautiful person who affected so many of us in a deep, profound way. There's a story that's told from the life of St. Francis, who lived in the 13th century in Assisi in Italy. Like most of the people from his time, St. Francis had a terrifying fear of leprosy. Like most of the people from his time, Francis took particular care to avoid lepers for fear of contracting the disease. Shortly after his conversion, that is his encounter with Jesus in the church of San Damiano, just outside of Assisi, Francis was walking outside of the town and heard the bell that announced that a leper was approaching. On this occasion, however, Francis did not do what he normally had done, that is, turn around and walk in the opposite direction. Rather, in this instance, Francis walked up to the leper, embraced him, and kissed him. Through this encounter, in this embrace and by his touch, St. Francis discovered the truth of our common humanity, that all human beings are made in the image and the likeness of God, worthy, each one, of God's love and compassion. Dr. Bonnie Stanton experienced and believed what I would refer to as these intrusions of grace all throughout her lifetime. Her vocation as a physician and her dedication to the most vulnerable are a testimony to this. And so as we begin today this celebration of her life, we pray the beautiful prayer of St. Francis and bring to mind the lived example in the person and in the professional life of Dr. Bonita Stanton. Let us pray. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Monsignor. I just really want to acknowledge Monsignor Riley has been with us from the very beginning with the school and actually served with me on the search committee that brought Bonnie Stanton to us here at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine. I'm Jeff Boskamp. I'm the interim dean of the school, honored to be here today in front of you. And I want to thank all of you for coming out in this weather, for many of you coming from long distances involving planes and trains. And I just want to thank you for being here to honor Dean Stanton. So we're here today to remember, I think, without question, what all of us would characterize as a life well lived, that of Bonnie Stanton, our founding dean of the school, and a woman of really humble compassion. But let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about how we met her and how things came on. We at Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine were really lucky to recruit Bonnie and to have her come and found our school, which was the culmination of her monumental career. From the earliest discussions that we had at Hackensack Meridian, we had really big ideas for a medical school to reshape the trajectory of not only in New Jersey, but of much farther beyond. And in those earliest of planning stages, we had great aspirations, and our ambitions were pretty much limitless. We really thought we could do everything. And as you know, it's kind of easy to talk about concepts. It's a little bit harder, a lot harder, to put those big ideas into action. So we needed a larger-than-life leader to do this and to realize this dream. And I think I might be the first person ever that said Bonnie was large. She was large in many ways. She, someone who had wide-ranging experience in medical education and research, life experiences that could shape our next generation of doctors and this vision of a brand new school. And most importantly, the heart and soul of a doctor, a person that could provide a vision to provide compassionate care for all. And after a national search, it was really clear that there was no better candidate than Bonnie Stanton. And I remember that morning, it was almost exactly 6 years ago, that I met her in the Aquarium Cafe at the Children's Hospital at Hackensack. It was her first stop. All the clinical chairs were waiting to meet this person who had flown in from Detroit. There were high expectations. We were looking forward to it, and I led her into the Montgomery's dining room, and everybody basically fell in love with Bonnie right away and instantly knew that this was the person. And because she embodied all the aspirations that we had for our new medical school, to develop a new generation of physicians with great empathy, with great compassion, who'd understand the goodness in every person and the equality of all people within the context of their community. And it was always in the context of the community for Bonnie. As the school started taking shape, we could all really see that we had such a great foundational leader to build. And she was a listener. I've talked to so many people about Bonnie, and that comes through in every conversation about what a great listener she was, the special kind of person who gave you all of her attention and was really engrossed in what you had to say and truly interested. And she wanted to make connections with everybody in our growing community. She always had a moment for those she saw in the hallway, whether it was faculty, whether it was staff, but most importantly, the students. And she had meetings with them over lunch, and those meetings with students can be a challenge. They are incredibly fun and incredibly difficult. The hardest thing to do with a student is promise them a lunch and then do it over Zoom, and they get nothing. It's really been hard and a real challenge. But she did it, and she listened to their feedback. She brought it to the cabinet. She carved out time that she really didn't have, and she wanted to hear from everybody and see how we could be better. And it's because she was invested in the future. She was always, that's what this school was about. I think that's why she chose this calling. She said to me and to all the students constantly, I heard this one refrain from her, and that was, there's never been a single day of my life that I wish that I was anything but a pediatrician. And she lived that. She always said that. But she has already made a global difference in the earliest part of her career, saving lives from contagious outbreaks, some of the poorest neighborhoods on this earth. And she helped bring changes to places that are right here in the US as well. So I think she came to realize the best way to affect positive change into a new century of possibility was to start at the foundation. These young and talented students who'd become the change agents. She would shape them, we would shape them, and they would then go out for the mission that Bonnie believed in and she ceaselessly advocated for all the time. She was committed that there would be a better world for everyone, one which would be remarkably better than ever before. That drove everything she did. And she committed all of us at the school in our vision statement that each person in New Jersey and the USA, regardless of race or socioeconomic status, will enjoy the highest levels of wellness in an economically and behaviorally sustainable fashion. That drove everything. We started every meeting with that. She always had this incredibly energizing optimism about everything, and in fact, she was a visionary. So she was molding these incredibly intellectually curious, creative thinkers, problem solvers, who would internalize what we were giving them at the school through a progressive curriculum that we were very excited about, and that would inspire them to do lifelong learning. That's what we're about. She amplified a message of health equity and human compassion. These were the lessons she learned in Baltimore. These are the lessons she learned in Bangladesh. And it was seen through the eyes of a very compassionate doctor. And in this, she really preached very much what she had practiced as the dean of a medical school who was also a clinical lifesaver herself. So it falls on us to follow through on what she had envisioned for this school. And it's not a question of whether we will. It's not a question of whether we can do it. We will do it because Bonnie was an exemplar of showing how a hard task can be undertaken gracefully. She did it all the time. But also because she laid such a solid foundation on the way to accreditation and the creation of new doctors. So this coming Friday is Match Day. We're very excited. Those of you that know Match Day, our students at noon will open envelopes and find out where they're going and what they're doing for the next 3 to 5 years. It's an incredibly exciting day, and it's our first truly suspenseful Match Day in that while some of the class will be our pipeline and stay at Hackensack Meridian, 39 of them will go out across the country and spread the message. And thus, her legacy will be multiplied many, many times over, and the teaching of Bonnie Stanton will disseminate as they go out as change agents. So we've spent a lot of time talking about Bonnie creating a new school of medicine. What I've realized over the past 2 months is that it wasn't at all about creating a new school of medicine. It's amazing, it's great. Over the past 2 months, I've come to realize that she created a community. And that community has come together in a way that she would be so proud of, that everybody has supported the school, has supported me, has asked what they can do. And Bonnie would be so proud of how, while we're teaching and while we're moving the school forward, what a tightly knit community we have been with the students, the faculty, and the staff all supporting each other in such a powerful way. So, and we all, of course, are all better people for having known Bonnie Stanton. So today we'll listen closely to one another because that's what Bonnie would have done. And we have people here from all over, and you'll hear from family, colleagues, friends, and we'll celebrate the life of Bonnie Stanton. So it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce the CEO of the most comprehensive health system, Bob Garrett. And I do want to say, and I need to share this with you, is that it seems like every day, or at least every week, Hackensack Meridian is announcing something outrageous, right? It's a new merger, it's an acquisition, it is a new innovative therapy, it is doing something that people haven't done before. So the reason I'm saying that, I mean, it's all incredibly exciting. But if you talk to Bob Garrett, what he will say of all this stuff that he's done in building this network, that his legacy and what he cares about the most and will lead into the future is this School of Medicine. And it will be Bob's legacy and Bonnie's legacy and all of ours at some point. Bob, thank you.
So you don't mind if I take my mask off, do you? So, Jeff was just saying that, every day we're announcing something outrageous or something really big. So I am announcing that come Monday, no one will have to wear a mask in here. Just saying. The rules are changing. First, I want to thank Jeff for that introduction and for his comments, and really meaningful. Jeff Boskamp and I go back a long way, and Jeff, I can't thank you enough for your leadership over many, many years, and even over these past couple months, you've done some amazing things in continuing Bonnie's legacy. So thank you so much. I know to the family and some close friends of Bonnie, you did travel a long distance to get here. I understand most of you got here before the snow started, so that was a good thing. And I also learned recently that Bonnie loves snow. So how fitting is today? Now, I don't know, Monsignor Riley, where's Monsignor Riley? There he is. Monsignor Riley, you probably know better than me, but I think this is a sign. I don't know, because it is snowing pretty hard out there, and she loves snow. Jeff was telling me that she always, was saying that there wasn't enough snow here in northern New Jersey. And I think the energy of today's weather really spoke a lot about Bonnie. I was just talking to her daughter a little while ago. We were talking about the energy she had every morning running, right, and challenging you, and just incredible person. But it is absolutely an honor for me to be here to celebrate the life of this very, very special person, Dr. Bonita Stanton. We were truly blessed to have such a gifted founding dean who really helped us launch a really remarkable mission to reinvent medical education. It was a little over a decade ago, although it seemed just like yesterday, that I sat in my backyard with Jeff Boskamp, Jeff I think will remember this, and with Bob Glenning, our Chief Financial Officer, and we strategized about making a dream become a reality. And it's been, I can't say that these last 10 years have been absolutely smooth, but we had some ups and downs. But there's a great quote by Thomas Edison that kind of describes the development of transforming our dream into this incredible school of medicine. And the quote goes like this: "Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration." And I got to tell you, we did sweat a lot along the way, but it was worth every single second. All of us came together to launch this bold experiment to improve medicine at the very start in how we train physicians to thrive in a new state of healthcare. Once we had the vision and the site, this beautiful, beautiful facility, this beautiful site for the school, the most important decision that we had to make was selecting the founding dean. And as Jeff just mentioned, we had an incredibly extensive search process. I mean, I've been around for quite a while in the field, but I can never remember a process that was so extensive, that lasted so long, that had so many false starts, but at the end of the process, at the very end of the process, a true superstar emerged. Guess who that was? I could not be more grateful for our teams. I could not be more thrilled in how far we've come, and we could not have found a more perfect fit for our founding dean than Bonnie Stanton. The School of Medicine is truly helping us live our mission, which is to transform healthcare and to be the leader of positive change. I often say that a mission defines us. It anchors us. It's our declaration of the difference that we seek to make the world better. Bonnie embodied our mission wholeheartedly, 100%. She was truly a woman that was ahead of her time, grounded in compassion and humility, who possessed tremendous knowledge in medicine, research, and education, and a thirst to always do better. Because of our belief in the school, in its mission, and in Bonnie herself, my wife Laura and I created an endowed chair for the School of Medicine founding dean in honor of Bonnie's lifetime achievements in medicine, research, and education. We were so proud to do it, and you know what? Jeff said it before. It was my dream and others to have a new School of Medicine, and I think when my career comes to an end, I will not be more proud than what we have created with Bonnie's leadership right here. Today in healthcare, there's an urgent focus on improving outcomes and investing more in prevention and keeping people healthier. We understand that to improve healthcare in America, we have to listen more. And let me just say about listening. You talked about Bonnie being a great listener. That is the hallmark of a great leader. Someone sent me this quote, and I hope I get it right. They said that leaders who don't listen eventually surround themselves with people who have nothing to say. Now, I just want you to know it was my wife that sent me the quote. Just saying. But Bonnie embodied a great leadership. So she knew we have to listen more. She knew that we must invest in a partnership with people and not just connect with them through illness. We must consider all the factors that impact their lives, because there's so much more to patients than what's in a medical record. Bonnie has known that for her entire career. She made certain that this embrace of humanism was at the heart of our curriculum here at the School of Medicine. She learned this from experiences that were forged in the most impoverished corners of the globe and in struggling American cities. She was a visionary. She was an innovator. And the rest of us in healthcare have been trying to catch up to her. I truly enjoyed listening to Bonnie tell different audiences, students, physicians, board members, community groups, and so many others about her message, which was very clear. Her message was that there is a moral and financial imperative for a new approach to medicine. She showed students the way through the Human Dimension course, a hallmark of our curriculum. The program requires students to go out in pairs and work with people in underserved communities, not just for a week, not just for a year, but for the entirety of their education. Thanks to Bonnie, our future physicians will always understand the value of prevention, and they will understand the impediments to good health. Thankfully, we are working to right the ship so that our nation's healthcare dollars, and more importantly, that we help more people get healthier. Because of Bonnie and her extraordinary leadership, the success of this grand experiment that we call the School of Medicine continues. Her legacy will continue. This past year, we graduated our first class, a day I will remember for the rest of my life. Getting to know the students and seeing their powerful bond with Bonnie Stanton was an extraordinary experience for me. All of our graduates from that first class are serving residencies at Hackensack Meridian Health Hospitals, truly an amazing accomplishment, just as Bonnie planned. A goal of the school was to educate and retain more physicians in New Jersey to address a looming shortage that is present throughout our nation. One of the students that Bonnie introduced me to was so moved by our school and so moved by Bonnie, our founding dean, that he actually decided to relocate from San Diego to New Jersey. Usually it's the opposite, right? People are leaving New Jersey, maybe to go to San Diego. But he could have been working for the Chamber of Commerce in New Jersey. He was so enthusiastic about New Jersey because I guess Bonnie was an incredible salesperson. He actually even told me that the beaches are nicer in New Jersey than they are in San Diego. By the way, they are. Our school is also helping to diversify the physician workforce, a major goal in our state that's one of the most diverse states in the entire nation. We want our doctors to mirror the communities that they serve, and I am so proud that half of our students are from communities of color. Bonnie was deeply committed to having more physicians from communities underrepresented in medicine join our ranks here at the School of Medicine. As many of you know, the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine received the prestigious American Hospital Association NOVA Award, only one of 5 given in the entire nation. And the recognition had to do with the fact that the school was honored for its commitment to community health. And I could not be more proud of Bonnie Stanton and the entire School of Medicine leadership team for achieving that great milestone. So as many of Bonnie's colleagues, friends, and family gather here today, they will note that the journey that started at Yale and ended here is nothing short of remarkable. Like so many of you, I am comforted by the memories, grand and small, of Bonnie just being Bonnie. There was not a more sincere person that I have ever met than Bonnie Stanton. I can remember when we announced that we had chosen her to be the dean, the founding dean of our School of Medicine. We gathered our leadership and our board. I think it was downstairs in the first floor auditorium. We had a big program that went on. People were making some speeches, and when it was all over, we had many reporters there, and they all gathered around Bonnie. I mean, they like literally circled her, and they wanted her to answer a whole bunch of questions. But out of the corner of her eyes, she saw this young man toward the back. He had just graduated from journalism school, but he was a little bit shy, and he was intimidated about really coming to the front where all these seasoned reporters were. Do you know that she stopped in her tracks as one of the top reporters in the state of New Jersey was asking a question, and she said, "Excuse me," and she invited the young man to the front of the room and took all of his questions before the rest of the reporters. I think that speaks volumes of Bonnie and how she always looked out for people that might be disadvantaged. Now, I have to tell you, the reporter that she interrupted was not one of our favorites anyway. No names, right, Mary Jo? But that story really says it all, because this is the heart of an educator. Think about that story. This is the heart of an educator. This is the soul of a woman who understands the future is riding on the next generation. And this is a legend of a dean who helped us turn a dream a decade ago into a rallying force for better health care for everyone. Now, I'm going to close by showing a video that was made, and I think it speaks volumes. Who better than Bonnie herself to describe what this school is all about? I think what you're going to get out of this is you're going to hear Bonnie's own words and her message to the students that was so strong, and the mission and the values of this School of Medicine come across in this video. I think you'll agree with me after watching this video that Bonnie has absolutely left an extraordinary legacy. Let's take a look.
I have loved my profession, and I think that most people who enter into the field of medicine understand how rewarding it is. To be able to start a medical school is beyond my wildest dreams. To the students, throughout your career, try to drive your actions through the lens of humanism. But remember, central to humanity is humility. Don't be too shy to admit that a situation is complex, that you're confused, that you're overwhelmed. Reach out for help and greater understanding. Let us share these conversations with you over the next few years, and you will continue to share these with your colleagues, your students, your patients throughout your career.
Today, we formally welcome you into the medical profession. Try every day to think about how important empathy and compassion are. Today's the last day I'll look at you and see our students. I thank you all so very much for all that you did to help us launch our new School of Medicine.
Truly, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you all.
Just extraordinary. Thank you all for being here today to celebrate the life of such an impressive person, a great leader, and a great friend, Dr. Bonita Stanton. Thank you, everyone.
I'm Miriam Hoffman, and I'm here today to share the words of Dr. Barry Zuckerman, who, along with his wife, Dr. Pamela Zuckerman, were very much planning to be here today. Unfortunately, due to a sudden injury, they cannot be here, but they asked me to share these words with all of you. Barry and Pam are longtime dear friends of Bonnie's, and just like Bonnie, they are pediatricians who see not just the patients they're caring for, but the problems in the world around their patients that need to be fixed. Bonnie brought Barry in as a consultant in the early days of the development of the school. First, I would just like to share a word from myself as well. I will be forever grateful to Bonnie for finding me and inviting me to be part of her last great project, building a new medical school from a blank slate in a mission-driven fashion. We got to ask ourselves, why are we doing this? What do we want to achieve? And that is what informed all of our decisions and our plans. And while we were trying to tackle some big problems with our new school, Bonnie always gave it a hopeful lens. She enabled us to see a future that could be different, better. As I reflect on the dean's impact on me, I think about so many things that she emulated, that we can all learn from and aspire to. Bonnie showed us what compassion and empathy really are, how linked they are to humanism, and having the ability to truly understand who your patient is and how to connect with them, how central they are to medicine and to medical education. Bonnie impacted so many people's lives for the better across the world, and her legacy will live on in our students, faculty, and staff, who I know will honor her memory by continuing the important work that she inspired, creating the next generation of physicians who are dedicated to humanistic and empathic healthcare delivery, equitable health for all, and who are able to tackle our greatest challenges. And now I will share Barry's words in honor of his dear friend and colleague, Bonnie. I've been thinking a lot about Bonnie since her shocking departure from the world a month ago. So many memories and visions of her come to mind. She was chipper, cheery, and had that easy, high-watt smile. She was a bit reserved, but spoke when it mattered. She looked a little fragile with her slender build, but she was sinewy and determined. Her social self was easy to be with, but her core was steely and tempered with compassion, benevolence, and kindness. She was not only committed to those noble concepts of equity and social justice, but actually lived them. Bonnie's values and the career she pursued were shaped by her parents, siblings, friends, colleagues, and her chosen life experiences. One special experience comes to mind. Bonnie spent 5 years working in Bangladesh, teaching mothers how to prevent diarrhea and to make oral rehydration solution to treat their children to avoid the dehydration that often took their lives. In the face of significant poverty, smog, and overwhelming filth, Bonnie told me how much she admired the women volunteers for their quiet, hard-working efforts day in and day out, how she admired them. Bonnie's career embodied that same quiet dignity and resolve. In addition to her work in Bangladesh, she combated social and health inequities and injustice through her research, teaching, and care initiatives in Namibia and inner-city Baltimore. As the chairman of pediatric departments in West Virginia and Detroit, she tackled the needs of both rural and urban poor families. And then her final act, her last hurrah. Look what she did. Bonnie became the founding dean of the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine in 2016 and officiated at the ceremony of the first graduating class of new doctors in June of 2021. Bonnie snapped up a special opportunity, a daunting challenge to go upstream to reduce inequities in healthcare and health outcomes by shaping the experiences, behavior, and values of future doctors. She wanted new doctors to have the skills to form trusting, collaborative relationships with patients and other health professionals and understand the communities patients live in. I was so honored when Bonnie invited me to join her in the development of a novel and innovative medical school curriculum. Her goal was to emphasize and foster the values that she held dear. Nights before our curriculum development meetings, Bonnie and I regaled each other with creative ideas, with Bonnie laughing in her way at the audacity of some of her ideas. The following days, we gathered with key players. There was such excitement and flow of ideas during those early formative meetings. Bonnie led the meetings skillfully, engaging all of us, eliciting ideas, and making comments. She saved most of her responses to the end, formulating a framework that created a shared vision and fostered the collaboration that made implementation possible and effective. Bonnie got such great reward and satisfaction listening to her students reflect on their experiences, getting to know and making relationships with families and communities. I'm thinking again of Bonnie's work in Bangladesh. She already knew that an effective doctor needs to connect with people across cultures, race, religion, life circumstances. Bonnie was such a healer. There is a concept in Judaism that reminds me of Bonnie called tikkun olam. It translates to repair the world or heal the world. That exemplifies Bonnie. Bonnie, my sweet friend and inestimable colleague, you are no longer physically present with us who loved you so, but you will live on in your students now and in the future. They will continue to be shaped by the medical school vision you brought about to repair the world.
dear Maggie, dear Becky, dear Pam, dear Kim, dear John, dear friends and colleagues of Bonnie, especially dear students of Bonnie, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot help to say, dear Bonnie, wherever she may be. We are all here, as it was so aptly titled, to celebrate your life. And what a life you have lived. If it weren't for Pavarotti, we naturally would observe a minute of silence in memory of you, but may now be inclined to honor you with a minute of applause, similar to the tears and the applause in the streets of Modena when the great tenor passed. But while the minute of silence has returned in force, celebrating your life, Bonnie, will for many of us become moments of both applause and times of stillness, quietude, and peace, where we miss you and we think of you in our personal space, when you walk with us or sit next to us for many years to come. I did not know you during your youth, Bonnie, and our professional paths crossed when we were in your early 30s and with your family lived and worked in Bangladesh. The 1980s and 1990s in Bangladesh were a veritable Garden of Eden for what these days we call global health professionals. A mix of serious research, progressive policies, and actual successful implementation with really astounding results those days, all supported by institutions like ICCDRB, what we used to call the Cholera Labs, USAID, the NIH, WHO, the World Bank, and many others active in diarrheal and other diseases of poverty, maternal and child health, family planning, and health reform. Already then, you were somewhat of a legend, both in terms of convincing those who were crucial in decision-making of new and innovative approaches, such as urban health at the time that Bonnie led as a new element at the time, and in terms of prolific productivity of analytical findings and publications. Not long afterwards, you joined the World Bank for a while, where you became one of the early protagonists in women and child health, as well as reproductive health. Priorities in the development agenda of the World Bank that continue until this day, and for which, I'm speaking on behalf of it, the institution remains seriously grateful to you. It was in those days that the early seeds of friendship among us germinated, in a mix of admiration for the intellectual curiosity and the stamina that you reflected on the one hand, and the kind and considerate personality elements emanating from you beyond work and professional collegiality on the other. It is this curiosity, always being interested, and I mean really truly interested, in a mix of seriousness and friendly and kind inquisitiveness that led to your reputation to stimulate, and I quote your academic institution here, as we have heard already earlier today, inquiry and research as part of lifelong learning. This is exactly what you always have been, Bonnie, and will continue to be an example for most of us, as has been mentioned already before. One characteristic that somehow became more widely known and impressed the high-flying economic minds at the World Bank was your inclination and long-standing practice to rise very early in the day and before family and office, work on your research and publications, going back at least to your 1980s cholera publications in Bangladesh and other Asian countries. in what photographers call the golden or magic hours of the day. A practice you continued, I believe, until your own unforeseen twilight now. Once you had decided, you had contributed and learned enough from your time at the World Bank, and your comparative advantage to give to mankind would lay beyond it, the more personal friendship with our family deepened. It then extended to our and your children, their progression through life and our mutual significant family experiences and events, some of which we were fortunate enough to join. For our family, your mountain house in Canaan Valley at Timberline and the vastness of the Dolly Salts became the embodiment of your hospitality when our daughter Samantha, together with several of her primary school friends, visited, and we often stayed with you in these wilderness areas. And wilderness they were. For instance, arriving at the house there and then having two big beavers on the deck, kind of telling us, "What are you doing here? This is our playground, go away." Or when we went canoeing on the Blackwater River, and some of us capsized in the exceptionally cold water, ending all safe and sound, fortunately. Or when, in my case, my mother from Europe visited, and we spent a weekend with you, Bonnie, there, and had long evenings in front of the fireplace, which happened during the time of the mad cow disease, some of you may recall. And we discussed prions and their pandemic risks. All memories that will stay with us and our daughter and friends for the remainder of our lives, all immediately part of our lives with you, Bonnie. In that same wake, I cannot but recall the moment when you stayed with us in Bethesda, likely after having had a meeting of Roger's board of advisors at the NIH, when an act of God felled the 200-year-old oak tree of the neighbors right next to our house. We had just returned home from a wonderful concert at the Kennedy Center. Bonnie had just retired to her guest room in the front of the house, and we were still cleaning up downstairs, and then, just before midnight, the house shook on its fundaments, almost giving the impression of an earthquake. And more than 50% of our house was demolished. By another act of God, Bonnie had selected the guest room in the front of the house, as the guest room in the back of the house, as well as our own bedroom, were demolished without any hope of survival if we had been there. Experiencing such an event among friends cannot but deepen the friendship, as jointly having escaped the abrupt, deadly force of nature even in one's own home. And then, of course, we cannot celebrate the life of Bonnie without Bird. As we all know, Bonnie was the opposite of a loud person. But then she had her alter ego, Bird. Louder and more fiercely they do not come. We had a joint attachment to parrots. Bonnie and Bird, and in our family, Pannenborg with a P, with our parrots, Pickwick. So kind of B and B and P and P, you could say. For those among us with parrots at home, you know how they become a mirror of reflection of what we say or even think. While dogs become valued family members, also in the case of Bonnie and her family, of course, parrots become part of ourselves, perhaps even in the sense of Wittgenstein's Proposition 7, that whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. With Bird and Pickwick, our discussions with Bonnie were at home to reflect whether there might even exist thinking using other forms of logic than our own. I have now celebrated your profession and career, Bonnie, your intellect and work ethic, your hospitality and some joint adventures, as well as some shared esoteric avian aspects of our families and lives. The most important dimension to value, though, for Laura, my wife, and me and our family, is that of friendship. As mentioned, friendship doesn't need many words, and joint experiences become building blocks over time. How happy we are in this respect to have still spent a day with you together last year among the thousands of flowers and trees and singing birds at Longwood Gardens just west of Philadelphia. Aeneas recounts the value of true friends and, quote, the day when they pass. He says, a day for me ever sad, forever sacred, so you have willed, ye gods. As we know from Montaigne, that he shared that with us in his wonderful essay on friendship. The peonies, the Paulonia blossoms, and the mason bees of Longwood will now, Bonnie, forever be your gift to us. Saying farewell to you now, Bonnie, we recall Dostoevsky's insight that the darker the night, the brighter the stars. And with that, the deeper our grief, the closer you will be with God. As such, Victor Hugo was right when he reminded us, Bonnie, that for all of us, you are not absent, you are merely invisible. May your soul rest in peace.
Oak, you're hard to follow. I'm Roger Glass, and I have to say that I'm not totally happy to be here, but I really wanted to speak on this occasion. On Friday, October 15th, just 5 months ago, Barbara, my wife, and I were sitting in the Delta Lounge at Newark Airport, waiting for our son to arrive from Berlin. As we drank our morning coffee, we spotted a masked woman of our age with a familiar and signature gait. We both remarked, that looks like Bonnie. And indeed it was. She was waiting for her flight to Detroit to visit Becky's family and prepare for the new arrival. We grabbed the table, and for 90 minutes, we had the most animated, scintillating, exciting discussion catching up on family, life, and the history of our friendship that began when she and John were classmates of Barbara's in medical school at Yale 45 years ago. Then I was only a suitor of Barbara's, and John was her best friend with Bonnie, and they were a bit skeptical about my intentions. They called me the bear, as John remembers. In those 90 minutes together, Bonnie updated us on her time in New Jersey, standing up this new school of medicine, and with her vision of community engagement and equity as her founding principles. She was truly engaged and excited in this endeavor by seeing the first class graduate and move on. She was excited by the expansion of the hospitals. She was challenged with constant issues that called upon her decades of experience from 5 years setting up a community-based health program in Bangladesh. Her leadership of 2 departments of pediatrics in relatively disadvantaged communities in the United States, West Virginia and Detroit, and her insights as an accomplished and highly respected researcher in child health. Bonnie was a role model for women in medicine. Like Barbara, she represented a new generation of women, assuming leadership of major departments in medical schools and their deanships, bringing a new perspective and sensitivities, but a position that would only improve the quality and focus of teaching and ultimately the delivery of care to the community. Yes, Bonnie was still that smart and driven, compassionate and kind, and totally engaged woman we had known 45 years, still on a mission to improve the lives and well-being of others. We revisited together the many landmarks in our careers which brought us to this point. We shared our experiences working in Bangladesh. We all learned so much from living and working in what was then one of the poorest countries of the world. We made deep friendships and gained an understanding of how poor communities come together to help each other. We learned that so much of our healthcare does not happen in hospital centers, but in the community with the involvement of all. Sitting there, Bonnie seemed so proud of what she had been able to accomplish. Shaping a new school in her vision, her dream job. She was still building, and it was expanding the training programs, wrestling with the challenges, all of which she was confident she could handle. And she seemed healthy. She had run her long distance that morning and was keeping fit and taking care of herself. And her motherly instincts were strong. She had a twinkle in her eye and a delight in her voice, discussing her children, her grandchildren, comfortably assuming her new and expanded role as devoted grandmother. About 8 years ago, I called upon Bonnie to help me and join the scientific advisory board at the Fogarty International Center at NIH that I direct. She graciously accepted, was one of the most beloved members of our board. She spent time with the staff. She provided advice and wisdom on issues of global health. She advanced our programs of research, and she was generous with her time and fully engaged listening. It was a delight to see her 3 times a year over a 4-year term at our meetings and dinners and just being together and reconnecting. So as Barbara and I stand here together today, we're left with an enormous gratitude of having known Bonnie for 45 years and through every stage of her career, from aspiring medical student to accomplished academic pediatrician, chair, researcher, and then founding dean. But in fact, I think her most cherished legacy were her daughters, Becky and Maggie, of whom she was deeply devoted and extremely proud, and provided us with regular updates. So I feel that for 30 years, John and Bonnie were a dynamic duo, sharing their lives, their careers, and parenting. They gained strength from each other, but as 2 extraordinary people, keeping in the same orbit can be challenging, but I see that love and connection with John being here today. Bonnie, we're left with wonderful memories of your friendship. You inspired us with your accomplishments. We enjoyed, indeed, relished in your joie de vivre, your love of life, your dedication to improving health by training the next generation to improve upon ourselves and to be better versed to address these challenges. We will miss you dearly. Thank you.
Not a dry eye, right? Whew. Hello, it is an honor to be here with all of you and to celebrate Bonnie Stanton. It's hard to figure out where to start. How do you celebrate the life of somebody so absolutely extraordinary, as we've all heard? I loved Bonnie, like I'm sure all of you did. She was a foundational mentor for me and a dear friend. I was blessed, absolutely blessed, to have had my life and my career touched by Bonnie. I met Bonnie about 20 years ago. I was a first-year pediatric resident, and she was the brand new chair of pediatrics at Children's Hospital of Michigan in Detroit. I remember the first time I met her, it was in an auditorium just like this. She was meeting the residents for the first time, the feisty residents, and we were peppering her with questions. And in she walks with her long skirt and Diet Coke in her hand. I heard she gave up Diet Coke recently though, but always with a Diet Coke in her hand. And I never would have expected from that first meeting how she would have so profoundly impacted my life and my career. She taught me so many things. Bonnie taught me how to be a pediatrician, She was at every morning report, every case conference, every grand rounds. She rounded on the inpatient service. She was an attending in our general peds clinic. And she pushed all of her learners. She pushed us to think critically, to dig deep, to follow the evidence, and to perfect the art. And most importantly, she instilled in us every single day that our work as physicians was about the patients. It was not about the power, the prestige, the paycheck. It was about the people that we are so privileged to serve. And as pediatricians, it's always the kids. It is about the kids. That's our why. That's why we wake up every single day. It is the kids. Bonnie taught me how to be a leader. After residency, I stayed another year to be a chief resident. And one of the best parts of chief year is that I had a standing meeting every week with Bonnie and my co-chiefs. And we would sit in her office and we would solve problems and we would create problems, and we learned how to lead. And we were learning from the absolute best. She taught us how to be persistent, how to be determined, how to be strategic, how to be thoughtful. And we all know that Bonnie was a brilliant and hard-working leader. She came in early and she stayed late. But in some ways, by just looking at her, no one would expect such a powerhouse. She was calm and quiet, gentle and unassuming. She was humble and kind. But as my co-chief, Nadia Tremonti, and if you know Nadia, you can hear her saying these words. We were talking about Bonnie's leadership style, and she said, and this is a direct quote, she said, "When Bonnie was in a fight, the untrained and inexperienced might place their bet on, say, the tall, cocky male. But Bonnie would kick their ass and own them without ever raising her voice or ruffling her feathers, and without a drop of Diet Coke spilled." She had an unparalleled leadership skill. And Bonnie was funny in her own way. She was absolutely funny. And for me as a leader, that's a really important leadership skill. I remember one day walking to the auditorium and we were walking side by side, and suddenly she stops and she looks at me and she's got this kind of twinkle in her eye, and she's sizing me up, and she's like, "Mona, I always considered you taller." She's like, "You're really short." I'm like, I took it as a compliment. I feel tall. So Bonnie also taught me how to be a woman in medicine. So after my chief year, she hired me. She was my first boss. When my oldest was just a couple months old, I had a daughter who was just a few months old. I had no idea how to negotiate a contract. I didn't even know that I needed a contract. She's like, "Mona, I can't just hire you. We need to have a contract." I'm like, "Okay, we need a contract. What do I have to do?" She hired me and she let me work part-time. I had another daughter. When Nina was born, she knit her a beautiful blue blanket. The bunny book is in my daughter's, in her bedroom. While on faculty, as a junior faculty, I loved obviously caring for children. I loved being a medical educator, but I soon got frustrated with the Band-Aids of patient care. I wanted to diagnose and treat the underlying issues that made people sick. Bonnie supported me and encouraged me to go back to school while I was on faculty. I got my master's in public health and health policy to address those upstream determinants that make our kids and our communities sick. So throughout this early part of my career, she taught me about the impossible balance of being a woman in medicine and how important it is to have a village of sisters who always had your best interest at heart. And I'm so grateful that Bonnie was part of that village. She was like the village leader, that village of sisters that had my back. Bonnie also taught me to move on. After about 10 years at the Children's Hospital, I had an offer to go to Flint, Michigan to become a pediatric residency director with Michigan State University. I had completed my medical school training in Flint, and it was a chance to go back to help a struggling residency program. They had a 2-year accreditation cycle, which is bad. They were on the verge of shutting down. So it was a chance to kind of be a turnaround leader. I applied on a whim, all thanks to Kate. It was like a joke. She's like, well, you should apply to this. I'm like, no, I'm not leaving Children's. But fairly quickly, it turned into a real opportunity. And I had a tough decision to make. Should I stay at Children's, where everything was familiar and almost easy, or should I go to uncertainty in Flint? I once again found myself in Bonnie's office asking for her advice and mentorship. We weighed the pros and cons, what it would mean for my career and my family, and in the end, she was supportive and encouraged me to go to Flint. And as if she had a crystal ball, she said, they need you. You will do great things there. By that time, I was weeping in her office. I knew that I would never work with anyone as awesome as Bonnie. She handed me Kleenex, and she gave me a hug, and she said, positions may change, but friendships will not. So I started my time with Bonnie full of idealism, altruism. Maybe I was naive. I wanted to change the world, and I wanted to help kids. And I left my time with Bonnie a decade later, still full of idealism and altruism, but also with a doctor's bag full of the clinical, research, education, and advocacy tools needed to change the world. And that is all thanks to Bonnie's leadership, mentorship, and friendship. A few years later, when the Flint water crisis happened, and I found myself at the center of one of our nation's worst environmental and public health crises, I leaned on everything that Bonnie had instilled in me. When everyone's eyes were closed to Flint's kids, I couldn't look away, because that's what Bonnie taught me. Our work is about the patients, the kids, and often kids that are unseen. Bengali kids, Detroit kids, Flint kids, New Jersey kids, they're all our kids. And when I was stuck trying to figure out how best to protect my kids, I knew I needed evidence. She taught me to stay grounded, obviously, in the kids, but she also taught me to wield the power of science and research for good. With data in your pocket, it is easier to move mountains. And when I shared that science, that kids were in harm's way, and I was met with a tsunami of resistance, I persisted. I stayed calm, and I didn't give up, because that's what Bonnie always did. No matter the issue, the controversy, the challenge, whether something small like dealing with a cranky faculty member or something large like founding a medical school, she always persisted. And when the ugly head of sexism said I was hysterical and reporters asked, but who's taking care of your kids at home? I thought about Bonnie again. If she could do it, then I could do it. And I was trying to come up with a word to describe Bonnie, and I was talking to my daughters who are now teenagers about Bonnie, and they kind of summed it up better than I ever could. They said, in quotes, Mom, she's a girl boss. And actually they said it with a hashtag. They're like, Mom, she's a hashtag girl boss. I'm like, yes, she is absolutely a hashtag girl boss. They're right. She is a strong and a brilliant woman who made the world a better place and who gave so many women, me included, the playbook on how to be a girl boss. Lastly, when I was repeatedly told that I wasn't doing what doctors were supposed to be doing or that I was stepping out of my lane, I would push back and I would say, I am doing exactly what I am supposed to be doing because this is what I was trained to do, trained by Bonnie. It's easy to draw a straight line on how her foundational impact influenced me and subsequently influenced an entire city, a state, and a nation. But I am just only one of her former students. you can trace thousands of lines between Bonnie and the lives that she influenced. Her impact is impossible to quantify, and every single one of us is blessed to have had our lives and careers touched by Bonnie. Throughout the years, we stayed connected. She was always unconditionally supportive, always the mentor, the friend, and still part of that village of sisters, even being hundreds of miles away. She would send me lovely emails. She's like, Mona, I just heard you on NPR this morning. You were awesome. I'm so proud of you. And I would always respond, thank you, because she taught me to be gracious. But I wouldn't be doing any of this without you. Shortly after Flint's water crisis, there was something similar down the road in Newark, New Jersey, and that afforded me another chance to come up and meet with Bonnie, and not only work with Bonnie, but also with her incredible students who were also working to make this world a little better. And just a couple months ago, always the mentor, she connected me with a Newark high school student that she was working with who wanted to go into medicine and was interested in advocacy. So for those of us in education and for those of us in pediatrics, so much of our today's work is about tomorrow. It's about the promise of what our students and our children will become, how they will make the world a better place. The legacy that Bonnie leaves is a tomorrow that is so much better than yesterday. And as we gather today to celebrate Bonnie's life, I know all of us in our own ways will continue that legacy. And I just want to end by saying thank you for the opportunity to share in this beautiful celebration. A special thank you to her family, especially her daughters and grandchildren, for sharing Bonnie with all of us. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for attending this remarkable ceremony, which is of such great importance to all of us in Bonnie's family. Nearly half a century ago, I had the remarkably good fortune to meet a pretty young medical student named Bonnie Stanton at the blood bank at Yale New Haven Hospital. At the time, she was moonlighting as a nighttime technician, and I was collecting blood for a patient during my clerkship. I'm not sure the patient ever got the blood, actually. It was a long conversation. I had even the better fortune to have been her close friend for the rest of her life and to have been her husband for the vast majority of those years. Bonnie's academic and professional accomplishments were nothing less than stellar. Other speakers have detailed her long list of achievements as she ascended the academic ladder, culminating in her service as the founding dean here of the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine, a daunting challenge at which she clearly excelled. Apart from being dean, I think the recognition that she was most proud of was being asked by her former chair at Case Western Reserve and long-term friend and mentor Richard Behrman, famous pediatrician, to serve as an editor of the Nelson's textbook, the Bible of U.S. pediatrics. She loved research and was really good at it. But what she loved most about academia was teaching and mentoring students, house staff, and young faculty. And her trainees loved her, as you heard from Mona. Following news of her death, Dr. Sachin Desai, who might have been your colleague at Children's, a former resident at Children's Hospital of Michigan, who later joined my research team, at the International Vaccine Institute in Korea, wrote me, she meant a lot to me as well as to every other pediatric resident student whose life she touched. I still laugh at all the memories. During residency, she would just hang out with us, as you described. It made all the difference in the world to have somebody who really loved us, cared for us, and worked us hard to become the best pediatricians we could be. Thank you for letting me know I will always remain thankful for all of her dedication and love. Bonnie was also a darn good hands-on clinician. One of my favorite stories occurred on our trip to interview for jobs at the International Center for Diarrheal Disease Research, Bangladesh, the ICDRB, back in the early 1980s. While there, we accidentally bumped into the director of administration for the Institute, who asked Bonnie whether she could look at his infant daughter, as she'd been running a very high fever since the previous evening. It quickly became clear that the little infant had overwhelming pneumococcal meningitis, a condition with a very high case fatality rate and an even higher rate of terrible neurological sequelae. In the absence of acceptable care in Dhaka, and there really wasn't much in those days, care of the infant fell to Bonnie, the visitor interviewing for a job at the ICDRB, but the only available treatment room for caring for this critically ill little kid was a primitive room in a room being used as a traveler's clinic to treat folks with traveler's diarrhea, expats in Dhaka. Bonnie spent the next 48 hours caring for the little girl at the bedside the entire time until Patricia was her name, was stable enough to be transferred for further care in Bangkok. We often worried about the likely consequences of this illness for Patricia, but lost track of the family. Then suddenly, fast forward 18 years, I was Director General at the International Vaccine Institute at the time, and received an application from Patricia's father for a COO position. When we met for the interview in Seoul, I finally drew up the courage to ask him about what had happened to Patricia, fearing the worst. He smiled, proudly showed a photograph of this beautiful young woman, and stated that she had just graduated as valedictorian from her high school class and was about to enter Tufts University as a freshman. Bonnie, being Bonnie, was forever modest about this truly remarkable save as a pediatrician. A pervasive feature of her career, which has been mentioned by many other speakers, was her compassion for the poor and disadvantaged. She served New Haven's poorest as the director of the Hill Health Center in New Haven. In Bangladesh, she led a program focusing on simple primary health care measures for destitute women and children living in Dhaka's absolute worst slums. And upon returning to the U.S., she devoted her research career to developing behavioral interventions directed for kids living in the projects in Baltimore, Detroit, and other poor urban settings. And even during a sabbatical that we took as a family in Egypt one year, Bonnie immediately found opportunities to volunteer with our daughter Becky every Saturday at a Mother Teresa's orphanage in the poorest area of Cairo. But of course, Bonnie was not all about medicine, and far from it. First and foremost, she was a devoted mom and grandmom. As busy as she was professionally, she never lost her focus on our two daughters, Maggie and Becky, the center of her life. And as we welcomed 4 grandkids, she took advantage of every opportunity to spend time with them, and especially treasured the annual summer vacations with them at the family cottage where she had grown up as a kid on Kelsey Island in Long Island Sound. Bonnie was an adventurous person. She loved traveling, especially internationally. Our first trip together as medical students took us by public buses, usually at night, so we didn't have to pay for hotels, across Tanzania from Dar es Salaam to Lake Victoria. We had one very memorable bus breakdown in the middle of the famous Serengeti Plain, in which after disembarking, we had to rapidly get back on the bus when people started shouting, "Simba." We all know what that means. That's a Swahili word. As there was a lion spotted in the area. Ever the adventure, Bonnie lingered to catch a glimpse of Simba and was the last person back on the bus. Additional trips in some ways remind me of the famous book by my favorite satirist, P.J. O'Rourke, Holidays from Hell. Included venturing into Medellin, Colombia, just to see what cartel country looked like. And an especially remarkable and memorable trip hiking in the Himalayas in Nepal with our kids in tow. At one point, crossing a rickety rope bridge suspended over a several hundred-foot deep gorge. I'm not quite sure what we were thinking when we did that. And Bonnie's love of adventure was undiminished by age. One of her last forays was to Antarctica with our daughter Maggie in 2019. And of course, our biggest family adventure, or some might call it a flight of fancy, was dropping our jobs, Bonnie as director of the Hill Health Center in New Haven, and myself as an assistant professor of medicine at Yale, and packing up everything in New Haven and going to live in Bangladesh for 5 years with our 2 little girls aged 2 and 4 years. Bonnie had a passion for animals and had pets of all description, from gerbils to guinea pigs to rabbits, dogs, monkeys, and as Auk mentioned, parrots. Nothing was too much for the pets. When our very young and newly acquired Yorkie broke a front leg, Bonnie returned from the vets and indicated that the vet had told her he could either amputate the leg, reassuring her that dogs do perfectly well on 3 legs, or he could refer the dog to a veterinary orthopedic specialist for insertion of a metal rod to preserve the leg at the cost of well over $2,000. That, by the way, was a lot of money in the 1980s. Without waiting for my reply, she immediately followed, "I knew you would agree that there was absolutely no choice but to go for the insertion of the metal rod," and I went ahead and scheduled the operation. Bonnie's love of animals also extended to bigger beasties. Wherever we lived, Bonnie would become a devoted member of a local zoo. I I'm not sure whether that happened here or not, but Bonnie even rented, get this, rented an elephant from the Dhaka Zoo. It was several miles away. The elephant had to walk across Dhaka to our house so that the elephant could give rides to kids attending the birthday parties of our kids. And upon returning to the U.S., both the Bronx and the Baltimore zoos became venues for kids' birthday parties. And later in life, the Detroit Zoo became Bonnie's favorite venue for entertaining our grandkids, with a special focus on the zoo's wonderful polar bear exhibit. One of Bonnie's gifts that you might not be aware of was her remarkable ability to deadpan. During our days in Dhaka, we took a month of home leave every summer. Because virtually no Western goods were available in Dhaka, expats commonly asked one another to do shopping for hard-to-find items during any trip back to the United States. This became kind of a buyer's club. And on one of these home leaves, Bonnie was assigned to purchase multi-month supplies of contraceptive foam for several neighbors. That was quite a bit of foam. At any rate, Bonnie dutifully went out on a major shopping spree to a nearby Walmart. And at checkout, the elderly woman who was the cashier visibly gasped when she saw this huge collection of contraceptive foam. Bonnie immediately reassured the woman, saying, "Oh, we're having a party." I could go on. My mind is flooded with wonderful memories about Bonnie. One that keeps coming back was our rowdy wedding reception the day after we graduated from med school. As Bonnie's father, normally a teetotaler, proposed a toast. And, this is really, a teetotaler proposing a toast. He asked for all of us to join him in a round of that famous 18th century Scottish song, "My Bonnie lies over the ocean, my Bonnie lies over the sea, my Bonnie lies over the ocean. Oh, bring back my Bonnie to me." Of course, at the time I wondered, what is he trying to say to me? But of course now, these words take on such a sadly different meaning for us. Bonnie left us much, much too soon. We will forever love her and treasure her memory. Thank you.
John, what have you done for me? I'm Pam Albertson, and I'm Bonnie's sister. And first I'd like to thank the School of Medicine and Hackensack Meridian and all of you who are joined here today to honor Bonnie with this remarkably special gathering. I'd also like to thank you for sharing Bonnie's professional world with us, her family, giving us some insight into her vision and her accomplishments to allow us to know her just a little bit more. In turn, I'd like to attempt to flesh out the portrait of Bonnie for you. She was a wonderful sister to my brother and to me. She was a devoted mother, of course, to Maggie and to Becky, her two daughters. She was a beloved aunt, and her greatest joy were her four wonderful and beautiful little grandchildren. And for those of you who don't know, there is a fifth one who will be born in May that unfortunately that little boy will never get to know his grandma Bonnie. And you, her colleagues here, have described, with everything you've said, just a remarkable and compassionate lady, a dedicated person, and a woman who just had wonderful gifts. And Bonnie indeed was a rare being who embodied all three of these and many, many more wonderful things. But to me, Bonnie was, and she always will be, and I say this in the very purest sense of this word, a girl. Bonnie delighted in life. She loved early morning birdsong, and as we've all said before, and as many of you probably know, she did get up very, very early in the morning. But she loved especially getting up early in the morning when we were at our little cottage on the island in Long Island Sound, just to listen to the wheeling calls of gulls and ospreys. It was a beautiful thing to hear. And then off in the distance, you could hear the sound of the bellboys. And she just delighted in that. She recorded the gentle warble of her screech owl on her phone, and she would share it with me. She would call me and just play the screech owl, so I would know who was there if there was any question and all. She loved the musical laughter of children, especially of her own little grandkids. And she enjoyed them as much as she enjoyed any aria, and you all who know her pretty well know she loved opera. And she enjoyed it as much as she listening to me singing happy birthday to her off key. We would share that on each other's birthdays and all. Summer wasn't complete for her until she heard loons calling when she would visit myself and my husband up at our little cottage on Mountain Lake in Maine. I remember Bonnie with pigtails and braids, climbing apple trees. She did cartwheels on the sandy beach, and she swam the sun-spangled waters that surrounded our island. We played cards and we read books. We lay on top of the rocks and watched the meteors of the summer. And we ran around on the grassy paths in the daytime and in the evening catching fireflies. We pumped water out of a real well, cold water, into pails, and we laughed as we spilled most of it. And we held each other's hands as we timidly ventured into the dark to use our two-seater outhouse. And you wondered why Bonnie was very comfortable in some of the slums which she did visit over the course of her adult life. And I tossed spiders at her and my poor brother, and they were really daddy long legs. They weren't real spiders, I promise you, Kim. And she screeched, and we just laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed some more. We took our little dinghies and prams out into the seas around the island when it was stormy. I don't even know if we had life jackets or not. I hope we did, but we may not have. And we scratched our poison ivy and sugar bites and mosquito bites till our skin just oozed and bled. And there were wonderful summers. Over the years, we did transport many of the members of the menagerie of pets that we owned back and forth to the island and opened boats. And when they left us, we cast their ashes into the waters and we buried them into the sandy soils. In winter, we would skate on frozen ponds, and we slid down our hill on our sleds. We sometimes practiced the piano with minimal effort, and we were lucky to go to the shows that were and musicals that we could hear in New Haven and then also on Broadway. As we grew older, we denied the years. We paddled kayaks and canoes, and we swam in waters that are now just a bit too cold. And we hiked on mountains on days that now truly are too warm. Bonnie would don her binoculars and seek out the summer birds that we had patiently memorized the previous season, only to have to relearn their names yet again. She knew how to laugh, and she found great humor in herself. and our antics, and as well, she found it in the mundane. We would drink chilled wine and watch sunsets, and we would plan on trips that unfortunately we'll never take. And as an aside, I just thought I'd throw this in because John reminded me of the Simbas. Bonnie, Peter, my husband, and I, and Maggie were going to take a trip to Africa this coming May. And I asked her, I said, Bon, you know, you love to get up and run in the morning, but I don't think that's a good idea. And she said, you know, I just had the best memory of my life. I think she said she said she was in Libya, and she went out one morning and she went running. And she said, and I looked up and I could see the lions and the trees above me. Anyhow, that was Bonnie. Well, we won't be able to do these things. She won't come up to Maine in the summer and count loons on the lake with me, and we won't see the shows that we had hoped to see or talk about our little grandchildren together, even though we wanted to and could never imagine it ever ending. We just acted like time would just go on and on forever. Bonnie cloaked herself in modesty, as most of you all know, and yet she was as comfortable walking along the Appian Way as she was in those fetid slums in Bangladesh. She walked with humility in the halls of the Vatican, as easily as she walked along Dead Cat Alley. And there is a place, and some of us know where it is, even. She didn't blink an eye while she shared podiums with presidents, but she was unnerved when she was seated next to Miss America once. And to her daughter's chagrin, she was as comfortable wearing her academic robe and hood as she was wearing a makeshift raincoat fashioned out of an extra-large garbage bag. She didn't only do that once, Maggie. Bonnie's wonderful, full life was really touched with grace notes. For me, probably the very best thing about Bonnie being my sister, this absolutely brilliant, dynamic, and unique girl, was that we were able to enjoy so many of these moments and experiences together. We really kept each other young. I had 70 years with Bonnie. 70 priceless years until that day when the fates cut the threads of the life of those most precious of all girls. I couldn't have been more blessed. I thank all of you, and I thank Bonnie. Thank you.
We would like to thank Florian Thomas, Jeffrey Boskamp, Miriam Hoffman, Lori Sullivan, Father Riley, and many others for the incredible care and support that all of you have shown to Bonnie and our family. At the same time, your actions have let us understand firsthand why this school is such a special place. We thank you for this also. Bonnie was happy during the very challenging early formative stages of the school when many difficult decisions had to be made. I asked Bonnie once how it was to work with Bob Garrett and his team. She simply replied that they always do the right thing. From over 40 years in business, I know that this is the highest form of praise that one can give. I know that Bonnie was both inspired and enabled by the foresight, passion, competence, and accomplishments of her faculty and staff colleagues. Bonnie absolutely lit up when talking about her students and opportunities for their involvement in the patient community. She was always there for those with medical concerns. Her door was always open. When we were small children, we ran free in the summers on a barrier island off the coast of Connecticut. In the evenings, before we went to sleep in a cabin built by our father, we would watch the gas lamp as it was turned off go from bright white and then to glowing red before it went out. I think some of Bonnie's selflessness may have come from those early years on the island. It would be easy to say the same thing for her imagination, her vision, but I do not think that is the case.
In a beautiful mass that Father Riley gave for Bonnie in January, he said that Bonnie had a vocation. I believe this is true. I believe that empathy and a focus on the human dimension of patients are manifestations of extraordinary care, and that extraordinary care is made possible in part by a deeper commitment. So we, in turn, pray for you, particularly the students, as you pursue being men and women for others in the most challenging of professions. We pray that you and all of us have the wisdom to discern correct choices and the courage to do the right thing, knowing full well that often it is the collection of small actions that is determinative and powerful. When many people of like minds and hearts get together and work very hard, great things can happen. On behalf of Maggie, Rebecca, and the family, we thank you for this beautiful event today, honoring everything that Bonnie and all of you have done. The future is bright.
Well, thank you all. This really, truly, as you said, was a spectacularly beautiful celebration of her life. And I think all of us learned other parts of Bonnie. All of us, of course, were changed by Bonnie. So thank you. Thanks for being here today. Thanks to the students who were here and got to know Bonnie and the school that she built and the community that she built. So I'd like to invite everybody now down to lunch in the main winter garden downstairs, where we can talk to each other the way Bonnie would have wanted us to. So thank you again for today.